Again, I'm going to briefly talk a little bit about Illustrator and the fruit and how to do some fruit, specifically the shadow. Um, I didn't go over that, so let me open up a piece of fruit if I can find one. There's a pair we did in class, right? So if you used a bitmap image with your fruit, as a background that you traced over top of it, make sure you remove that. You can just delete that layer or delete that image, and then just keep your fruit as it is, right? And then to make the shadow for your fruit, the easiest way that I have found is to duplicate the main shape, or all of it, if you want to include even the stem and everything, because that might be part of your shadow. It might not be. You can duplicate by, of course, Option, click, and drag. So I duplicate everything. Okay. Then I fill it with black. Pure black. Get rid of that texture. You don't need that one. There's two of them there. There we go. Pure black. And of course these lines aren't black either. You can get rid of some of that stuff. What you're looking for is basically the outline. So I'm going to delete whatever junk that is here. Hold on. So I duplicate my fruit. Then, of course, after I do that, the magic key on the keyboard, or the magic button on the keyboard that we use a lot, is, of course, the blur tool. What better way to use the blur tool? But there isn't one other one that you might want to try also, called the feather. Anybody use feather in Photoshop? Right? Nice soft edges, right? Feather means it blends to transparent. Okay, you can use either feather or blur. So I haven't demonstrated feather yet. Let me do that once, and then we can also do blur. So let me duplicate this again. I'm going to duplicate it so we do it a couple different ways. So what we want is kind of just like the fruit shape, kind of soft and blurry and underneath it, and kind of towards the bottom. So the quickest way would be, again, let me demonstrate blur first, and then I'll show you the feather option. So blur is under effects, of course, blur. And I'm going to use Gaussian blur, and you can hit the preview button and really crank it up, not too high. You'll get kind of boxy look to it. And then hit OK, and then squish it like it would be a shadow, and then move it all the way to the back by using Object, Arrange, Send to Back, so it's behind my fruit. Object, Arrange, Send to Back. And then simply just put it underneath it, kind of there, and then you can skew it on an angle. To skew it on an angle, you can skew it by using the Object, Transform, Shear is one way, or actually a more easier way would be to use the tool. There's a tool in the toolbar for skewing, and what I mean by skew is that it'll put it on an angle, right? Because it looks like the light is coming from this side, right? This side is hot. So we want the shadow to be kind of this way over here, right? So I can use this option, this tool right here. It's called a free transform tool right here. It's called free transform. There's a whole bunch of perspective tools in there, free distort, and if you just use the normal one, you can put it, you kind of cursor along the edge. If you put your cursor kind of along the edge here, you get this crazy looking cursor right here, and then you can kind of drag this way. Again, it's called the free transform tool. If I click on it this way, I can then sort of drag it kind of over here like that. Well, that's a little bit much maybe. There we go. There we go. So again, I'm using this tool right here, free transform, just the default setting, this one right here. And after I, made a little black, and you can add some opacity to it, of course, move it around. I did it fairly quickly, but you can quickly get yourself a little shadow very easily by duplicating the shape, putting some black in there, blurring it a little bit, and so on, and you can get a quick kind of shadow that way. Probably use a little transparency also in there. Select it, select all your object, maybe turn down the transparency. It doesn't need to be so dark. That looks a little better. I try to move it a little bit too. It doesn't need to be cut. Oh, maybe Maybe move it a little bit. Probably group everything together too, so that, there we go. Maybe something. That's a little better. How about that? Okay, quick, easy shadow. Let me show you the feather option. Again, there's blur is one way of doing it, but they do have feather, like you have a feather inside of Photoshop. And Photoshop feather is where you get the nice transparent. There's a thing called alpha channel. If you don't know what an alpha channel is, you should know what an alpha channel is. Okay. When we're talking graphics in the computer, at least Photoshop. Let's go back to Photoshop for a moment. You're working with a 24-bit image. 24-bit. Okay, what is a 24-bit image? You got 8 bits of red, 8 bits of green, and 8 bits of blue. That equals 24-bit image. Okay, so when you're in Photoshop, you're working there. But Photoshop is even higher than that. If you want to do things like you want to have soft edges to something, it blends to transparent. So there's also something that is an 8-bit of what we call alpha channel. And if you ever use channels inside of Photoshop, this is your transparent layer. So that when you have an edge of an image, it actually blends to transparent along there. So it gives you soft edges. It's called a feather usually. The option is usually feather. And so this will give you a nice soft edge. And so we add that, and actually in Photoshop you're working with a 32-bit image because we added our alpha channel in there. Okay, so it's a 32-bit image mostly. To add an alpha in Illustrator is kind of similar. You're going to have soft edges to something. And if you save it, if I click on this, it's underneath Effects. If I can find it, Stylize Feather. Under Effects, Stylize Feather. And if you choose that option, it'll bring up a window. And it has something called a radius. You hit the preview button, you don't see much, but you crank it up, you can start seeing the soft edges. See that? So it's a little bit different than the blur. What it's doing is it's kind of taking the object and bringing the softness in. And so you start getting, this is actually transparent. Okay, so this is nice and soft. You can see the transparency coming through right here. See it right here coming through to the edge of the thing. And you can do the same thing. Squish it, distort it, put it back there. The blur has some problems. If you put too much blur in there, you get this box. Because it has some kind of box to it. You might have noticed that. Where this won't do that. That's why I'm showing you a different way. Okay? This won't give you that crazy box that you get with the blur. Okay? So again, it's under feather is under Stylize, I think it was. Where was it at? It was under Effects. Some Stylize, something like that. Yeah, and if you use that, you can do the same thing. Let me delete this one. Boom. We can use this. Boom. I squish it down. Put it underneath my thing here. Oh, it's on front. Object arrange, send to back. And then give it a little skew maybe. There we go. And then you might need to give it some transparency to make it so it's not so harsh. And
what menu is the skew?
Skew is a tool. It's right here. It's this one I'm using, Free Transform. If you use this tool, you can then skew it this way like that. And then, of course, give it some opacity so it's not so harsh. I don't know. Maybe the blur was better. I'm just pointing at different ways. So put two fruits together. Think of how the lighting is. And have the shadow go in the same direction if you do two different things of fruit, right? And when you're making two different things of fruit, think of the lighting, right? The light coming from this side on this one, I might make another piece of fruit that has the light coming the same way. You don't want to mix and match lighting. Any questions about making a shadow? You ready to move on? You have enough knowledge to make cool looking fruit? Okay, we can save this as a separate recording.